High up in the eastern peak of the Himalayas resides a country with a rich culture and tradition in which its people hold dearly to their hearts. The country of Bhutan is located in South-Central Asia between China and India. Bhutanese Nepalis are Bhutanese citizens of the Nepali origin who were evicted from Bhutan in the 1980s and the early 1990s. The Nepalis are descendants of people who in the 1880s began migrating to the south of Bhutan in search of farmland and agriculture, and would become the country's main source of food with their rich farmland. These people are also sometimes referred to as the Losamtas people, meaning the people of the south. This group of people not only enjoyed owning property and having government jobs, but were also considered citizens, even though they were not permitted to settle far north. However, they were able to retain their native Nepali language, culture, and religion. All of this would soon change in the 1990s when the king of Bhutan and ruling elite would soon see South Bhutan as a threat to the kingdom. With that being said, the government issued a census to be done on all those living in the south, saying that each person had to be able to provide proof of residency or had to declare themselves as non-national. The government also imposed a policy called Bhutanization, meaning one nation, one people, which suppressed the culture and language of the Nepali origin of Bhutanese. The policy banned the teaching of the Nepali language in schools and required residents to dress in the traditional clothing of the Drukpa. This policy then triggered the Nepali origin to anti-government protest. This protest failed to remain peaceful due to the king's request to target ethnic Nepalis by the Bhutanese authorities. Properties were seized and many of the native people were not only arrested, but were tortured and had their houses destroyed. Many were forced to sign voluntary migration certificate before being expelled from the country. By the 1990s, the king of Bhutan announced that the Losomtas could not prove that they had been residents of Bhutan in the 1950s and had to leave. All of these refugees whose families lived and farmed in the southern of Bhutan for generations had to leave Bhutan and migrate to India. But instead of India giving them refugee, India then transported them to eastern Nepal. From this, over 106,000 refugees had to flee and began to resettle in the Western countries like the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. Philadelphia, being among the many cities that accepts refugees from other countries, resettled over 3,000 refugees from Bhutan since they have been granted into the U.S.
Considering the fact that Philadelphia is a melting pot, the resettled refugees of Bhutan have services to help them accommodate to their new life. Coming to Philadelphia and many other cities in the United States, refugees soon came to see that life here is not at all how life in Bhutan and Nepal after the One Nation, One People policy came into effect. Those who have resettled here and in other countries, such as Canada and Europe, realize that life in these new countries have many more benefits than staying at the camps in Nepal that they were forced into. With Philadelphia having more than 3,000 Bhutanese refugees, an organization stepped forward in 2013 to help the community feel more welcomed in their new home. This organization, known as the Bhutanese American Organization, works with refugees in many different ways, trying to better the welfare of the community. The organization's executive director, Leela Kukil, in fact recalled the shift when the policy One Nation, One People was enforced. This drove him to face the fate that many other refugees felt they had to flee. Now, Leela and the organization help refugees in many different ways by helping them adapt to the United States lifestyle, which is very difficult for them. However, helping the refugees starts even before they arrive in the United States. The organization makes sure that the family has a house to live in with all donated furniture and home goods. The case managers will meet the family at the airport and also help them with Social Security and other government-funded programs. Case managers also try and help the new refugees by helping them find employment to support their families' everyday basic needs.
The biggest challenge that the Bhutanese refugees face when they resettled is communicating with others. Having the language barriers created many more difficulties to face because without communication it can be hard to adapt to your surrounding environment. They had many troubles with transportation because they were not familiar with the area and were unable to communicate with others for directions. Having trouble finding their way around South Philadelphia made it extremely challenging for the Bhutanese refugees to settle, because they didn't know where important things were, such as hospitals, doctor's office, and even food stores, although the food stores that they did have were limited with the Bhutanese culture. Many of the Bhutanese refugees did not choose to use the healthcare resources that the U.S. provides because of their cultural backgrounds on health and religion. Besides this point, going to the doctors was fearful for these refugees because they did not want to disclose their status with the doctors, because they were scared of being sent back to the country they were kicked out of, or being resettled again somewhere else. The Bhutanese refugees did not believe in the Western health system at all, and thought that they could heal naturally with home remedies. Many refugees only seek care in the event of a serious health problem instead of preventative care. This causes many more difficulties for the refugees because oftentimes when they do have an emergency, they do not trust the healthcare providers since they are used to their cultural remedies and are not comfortable discussing the ways that they heal with the doctors. The South Philly community has limited resources for the refugees, but they do their best to provide as much as possible. Although there are lack of resources, we were able to see during our trip that it seems like a very closed-in community, and the resources that they did have were in walking distance of each other. For example, we passed by a temple, a mosque, and a few corner markets that sold Nepali and Bhutanese food products. But this just goes to show that they are very dedicated to providing the resources for these refugees.
As mentioned earlier, it is extremely difficult in helping Bhutanese refugees adapt due to the fact that they came from a landlocked nation, meaning they had no TV or access to the outside world until 1997. They had little education and only focused on having a lot of kids. Since the country was prosperous in agriculture and livestock, a bigger family will be able to do more work in the fields. It's two completely different cultures, so the Bhutanese American Organization of Philadelphia tries to provide English classes so they can emphasize the importance of learning the language. The ESL classes will allow Bhutanese adults to be self-sufficient and be able to prepare themselves for their neutralization interviews. In addition to ESL classes, they have Nepali language classes. The class targets the younger Bhutanese generations in hopes of keeping their culture alive and bridging the gap between the younger and older generations. The center is also a place for people just to come and have someone to talk to if they're feeling down or need some uplifting advice. The Bhutanese community has struggled in combating mental health. Mental health is still seen as a taboo, so they don't really discuss it or fond of using medications. But people are starting to open up. They developed a health and wellness program to help with the issue of stress buildup and depression. If red flags are seen amongst refugees, Leela and others who assist them on a day-to-day basis try and take action quick. They make home visits and bring them to the center to talk. They try to bring healthcare providers to the center so it's convenient and less of an issue with the language barrier. As a social support system, the Bhutanese American Organization of Philadelphia has a senior engagement program every Saturday for 2 hours due to older adults being confined at home because they don't have a job. With this being said, they want to avoid the development of mental health issues. On another note, the Bhutanese American Organization of Philadelphia has a strong partnership with Thomas Jefferson Hospital. They have healthcare providers that come out to make it more convenient for refugees that need medical attention. If not, Bhutanese refugees usually go to Methodist Hospital. Primary care is usually at Jefferson, and also Greater Philadelphia Health Center, which is located at 8th and Washington. Transportation is tough, so sometimes bringing a healthcare provider is a better option. Some major health issues that the refugees deal with are diabetes, respiratory problems, which is particularly the older population due to the fact of using tobacco from back home, having lived a stressful life for a very long time, and people often becoming forgetful. Those who work with refugees realize kids and adults aren't really retaining information due to past trauma. Some things that the BIOP have done was getting people evaluated at clinics or at the community center, giving them treatments or counseling if available. Overall, the Bhutanese community has grown and networked to provide refugees with an abundant amount of resources to allow them to live life prosperously in their new environment, and is still striving to do everything they can for the Bhutanese refugees. Thank you.